Everything you see around you in your physical life, even yourself, isn't real. And what I mean is that if you were to look at anything in your physical world, pick up anything, look at it, touch it, experience it, and you were to look at it at a deep level, you were to get into the depths of whatever that is made up of, get down to the atomic level, and even go deeper into those atoms that are creating and making up whatever that physical thing is, you would discover, under the right scientific instruments, that it is actually made up of mainly empty space and energy. In fact, the atom itself is made up of 99.9+% empty space and energy, and only about 0.000001% physical matter reality. And it is this that are the building blocks of everything you see around you physically. And so literally everything around you that you see as physical, everything in this physical world, isn't real in the sense of how you think it is. It is not physical. It is mainly empty space and energy coming about in a way that appears physical. Now, why is this something even worth mentioning? It's because if you're trying to change your life, if you're trying to live in the ways that you want freedom, you want better finances, you want better relationships, and you're going around trying to change it from the physical, from that tiny percentage we mentioned, you're not going to get very far. And maybe you have experience in doing this. I'm sure you've seen people trying to do this, trying to be physical, influencing physical, and it almost never works. Or if it does work in producing some better results for you, it always leads to more challenges down the road, more problems, more fires to put out, more suffering and struggle. But when you recognize that everything in your reality, everything in your life actually isn't real, or at least not in the physical way that you've been led to believe, you can then start to play with a different rule set when it comes to the game of life. And this rule set shows you how to operate from what we call the non-physical, which is that 99.9%, and to start influencing your life in ways so that you can experience more freedom, so that you can experience financial just increase, so you can start doing things you love and also earning a vocational living or whatever else it is you want much more easily. Because when you start recognizing and adhering to that 99.9+% in very specific ways that we'll go over, things in your life start to change. A quote I really want you to keep in mind is that reality is subject to influence. In fact, the influence you can have over your reality is so great and very, very powerful. In fact, you are actually creating your reality each moment at a time. But of course, if you're just focused on the physical, that isn't really physical, again, it's made up of this mainly empty space and energy, you're going to have almost no luck in changing your life. And this isn't just fluffy speech or speaking. This is stuff I have used myself in order to completely transform my life and the life of my clients. You know, for me, it helped me to get to a 6-figure business where I'm traveling all over the world, able to work from anywhere, having that freedom that I always wanted by applying these principles. I fell in love and brought my girlfriend with me to all of these places. And of course, she lined up and was aligned perfectly and wanted to do all of that too, because I wanted that and kind of programmed that into my game as well. We even have a 5-month-old son because we wanted to start a family, and just all of these amazing things started occurring in my life when I started operating from this new rule set in which I'm going to give you today. And again, it wasn't just me, you know, I wasn't just lucky or just, you know, this only works for me. It works for every single person. You know, we have so many clients that we've taken through a system where we're coaching them through this, giving them accountability to stick with this, that are getting phenomenal results in sometimes just a few weeks, let alone the next few months that we're working with them by applying what I'm going to give you some of in today's video. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what this different rule book to life is. We're going to be going over how you can start influencing your reality so you're seeing real changes in what you call your physical life, in your actual life of the 5 senses. So if that's interesting to you and you actually want change and not just more information, then keep watching because it's exactly what we're going to do here. Okay, so like we mentioned, reality is actually 99.999999% empty space and energy. This is so important to keep in mind because if you get mired or drawn in and seduced by the physicality of reality and believe that's all there is, well, there's not much you're going to be able to do. You're going to get hooked into the physical game. You're going to just be in your 5 senses and never be able to take a step back and really influence reality from this non-physical perspective. And again, I'm going to go over how you can influence reality from this non-physical, but just keep this this quote in mind. The outer world, and that's what we're calling the physical, follows the inner world. The inner world is made up of the energetic world. It's made up of the mental world. It's your thoughts. It's your imaging. It's your emotions, which is energy in motion. It's your connection to something greater. The physical world is your five senses. These five senses we have that create these interpretations to our brain that create this physical world around us, or this perceived physical world around us, right? So that's why we can touch and feel and taste and all of these different things in this physical game. Again, if we were to break all of this down, all of this behind me in the camera, we would see that it's mainly empty space and energy. However, again, we perceive it through our five physical senses. Now, most people stop there. They just perceive things through their five physical senses, and they don't develop this other part of themselves, which is the bigger impactor, the one that has the bigger impact when it comes to what they receive in their life. So when you realize that everything in your life is not as real in the sense of you've been taught, again, it's very real, you're experiencing it, it's real in that sense, but it's not physical in the way that you've learned. It actually means that so much in your life is very, very malleable, which means subject to change. Now, you might ask, if that's the case, why do people seem to have the same thing year in and year out, or maybe even a little bit worse, but it all seems to say the same? You might say, I've been in the same situation over and over and over again. Well, there's a reason for that. It isn't because that's just the way it is and that's your lot in life. That's one of the biggest lies that's ever been given to humanity. That this is your lot, this is what you have to accept, you're this class, you're this thing, and therefore that's what you'll always be. It's one of the biggest lies. It's just so not true. However, if you believe that to be true, you think in that way, you experience things in that way, then it's not that it will always be that way, but you are continually recreating that experience over and over and over again. You see, all of this physical stuff that, again, is made up mainly of empty space and energy, is coming about based on a few different things. They're called effects from certain causes. And the thing that creates these effects, so this physical stuff in your life, what appears in your life, your physical circumstances, is actually the inner world. Like we mentioned, the outer follows the inner. So what is the inner world? Well, I want you to think of it like this. You have that physical side of yourself, right? So if we put that at the bottom of the triangle here, you understand that. But we now also understand that 0.0001% of what actually reality is and what's going on. So if we focus just on this, we're not going to be able to influence reality that much. Really, not at all, right? Or it's going to be a struggle to do so. However, there are these two other parts of yourself, one the mental and one the spiritual. Now, the mental, like I mentioned, is your thoughts, your visualizations, your imaging, anything that kind of we can think of from the mind, right? So obviously thoughts are not physical, not yet at least. Obviously when you visualize things, it's not in your physical space. However, these things still exist. You're still tuning into these things, you're still thinking these things, you're still receiving these things, they're absolutely there. Then you have the spiritual side of yourself, and this is kind of a two-part thing. It's your connection to something higher. We can call this your higher self, we can call this God, we can call this source, but it's that connection to what we could call the divine. But it is also the emotional self. This is energy in motion, the emotional self. So this is where we're dealing with energy. So thoughts and energy is the simple way in which you can think of this. So this is what makes up the inner world, and it's what so few people pay attention to, which is why changes don't occur in their life. They're not paying attention to how they're thinking and how they're feeling. And when they're not, and they're repeating the same thoughts and feelings every single day, which for most people fall in the category of quiet desperation. Most people are not feeling so good. They're feeling guilt and shame and apathy. They're feeling anger. They're feeling pride, maybe. They're feeling fear. And then they're thinking corresponding thoughts. So they're thinking negatively. They're thinking they can't do it. They're thinking, oh, this is my lot in life and nothing changes and people don't change and I can't change and I can't be any more than this. Or some people have and some people don't. And all of these thoughts and feelings reinforce the current reality that they are in. I'm sure you've heard the idea that your personality becomes your personal reality, and it's very true. And what is your personality when we really break it down? Well, it's your beliefs. It's your convictions. Those beliefs and convictions give birth to certain emotions. Those emotions also reinforce certain beliefs and certain convictions, and it's this that starts creating your personal reality. One way to think of it is your physical life, your physical reality is actually what we could call an energetic and mental history. It is an accumulation, a coming about and out picturing of the thoughts you have been thinking about most of the time and the emotions you have been dwelling in most of the time. The combination of that is what creates your current physical circumstances. So if we want to create new physical circumstances, we don't start from the physical. That's the effect. That is the byproduct. We start from the inner world, which are going to be your thoughts. Again, to break this down simply, your thoughts and your energy, or how you're feeling, your emotions. This is why you hear quotes all of the time, or it's kind of perpetuated and parroted in self-development circles. You get what you think about most of the time, from The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. Why is he saying that? Because it's so true. If you are thinking all of the time about positive things, what you do want, you're focusing on your dreams, your goals, and desires all of the time, while also reducing importance or releasing attachment, they're going to start coming in. You're going to have a new history that's created. And also we throw in what you feel about all the time, because if you feel bad all of the time, you create more circumstances that are aligned to that. If you're feeling good, genuinely, you're feeling more joy, excitement, gratitude, which is why so many people teach attitude of gratitude, because what does that do? That creates a new energetic history for you. When you're grateful, when you're appreciative, life starts presenting more things in which you can be appreciative for. It starts bringing more of that in. And so it's what we're doing on that mental and spiritual plane of our existence that's going to create the physical stuff in your life. Again, why is this? Because the physical stuff in your life is the same thing. It's just a denser rate of vibration. Remember what the physical stuff is made up of. It's mainly empty space and energy, right? So what you're feeling, what you're thinking is what's making up what we call the physical stuff. If we were to look at this on a pole, and this comes from Hermetic wisdom, and at the top of the pole we had spirit and energy. And this is kind of like pure spirit and energy. This is kind of like the fastest vibration you can imagine. It's so quick. Like, again, you can feel instantly, you can think instantly, and thoughts are also higher up on that pole. Well, if you go lower down on the pole, that's when you start getting into matter. And matter is a denser rate of vibration. It's still vibrating. It's still that empty space energy and only a tiny bit physical. Like, I mean, statistically negligible amount of physical. But the lower you go down on that pole, the more dense it is. To the grossest form of matter, like the densest form of matter, you go lower on that pole. But what you'll notice on this pole is it's actually all the same thing, just at different modes and rates of vibration. And so everything you see around you in the physical is energy. It's made up of energy. It's made up of those thoughts. It's all the same thing. It's all in correspondence. It's not different. The thoughts that you are thinking eventually give birth to the things that come into your life. Same with the feelings. And so if we want to change that grossest form of energy, that denser rate of vibration that we call the physical, we need to recognize that physical is the same thing as the energy and the thoughts. It is all of a like kind, just at different rates of vibration. And so if you start vibrating differently emotionally, and you start vibrating differently from your thoughts, you will create new vibrations, different vibrations physically in your life, things that correspond to how you're thinking and how you're feeling. It's also why physical stuff takes longer to appear. So you could think of something right now. If I say, think of, a very cute dog that's, rolling around and, asking you to scratch its belly, you can think of it probably pretty easily, and you can think of it instantaneously, right, in your thoughts. If I tell you to feel excited, and I just asked you, think of a memory of when you were excited, you will start noticing through correspondence, because you're thinking of that you feel excited very quickly. And when you train yourself, you can do this instantaneously. These things happen very quick because they're higher rates of vibration. You don't need to wait weeks, after going, I want to feel good, to feel good. You could do it and access it right now. You don't have to wait weeks in order to think of something. If I say, I want you to think of an orange, you can think of an orange instantaneously, right? If I say, I want you to think of a certain phrase, you're going to be able to think of it instantaneously because these are higher rates of vibration. However, when it comes to the physical, because they're denser rates of vibration, they take what's known as concentrated particle flow to start coming in your life. And here is how you start influencing the game. If you can keep your focus in a particular direction long enough, you will start seeing changes in your physical world, because that means you're now thinking and feeling in a very particular way. Again, a higher way feeling-wise, so you're more excited, more joy, all that kind of stuff, and you're thinking better thoughts, so you're thinking positively. You're thinking about what you do want versus what you don't want. Most people think about what they don't want. They're complaining, they're moaning, they're bitching, and so they get more of that. Very few are thinking of what they do want and getting excited about it, right? This is what I want, and keeping my thoughts on that. And a quote I also love, and something I apply all the time, and again, something we help our clients with, is have more faith in your vision than the current physical circumstances. If you look at your current physical circumstances and you feel bad, you are just recreating more of the same because of what we've already gone over. But if you look at your physical circumstances and you ignore it, so you ignore the sense data, the 5 senses, and you instead put your attention on the inner world, on your vision, on feeling good about your vision, on thinking about your vision often, like throughout the day, you're daydreaming about your vision, you're thinking of it. You are making that something that's more real than your current physical circumstances. It will not take long until, again, that denser form of vibration, that physical matter that aligns with that starts to come into your life. But you have to be focused. You have to stick there. If you think about it every now and then, but most of the time, remember, you get what you think about most of the time. You're thinking negatively. You're thinking about what you don't want, which is going to cause you to feel like crap. Well, then that's what you're going to get. And whichever one you focus on more is going to grow. Think of it this way. If you have a garden and you're planting some flowers, you're planting some fruit trees, and you plant them and you're watering them for a day and everything's going well, but then you stop watering them and then you're giving attention to the weeds in the garden, what's going to grow? And that's what most people are doing. They're giving attention to the weeds in the garden and going like, I hate this, but they're giving attention to it and ignoring the plants they want to grow. And so because of that, the weeds get bigger, they get stronger, they start taking over the garden, they start strangling out the things that you want to actually grow because that's what you're giving your focus to. And remember how earlier I mentioned that most people, are having the same thoughts and feelings day in and day out? People are having about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, or I was saying that most people don't change from year in to year out. Why? Because you have about 60 to 80,000 thoughts every single day on average, right? 60 to 80,000. So it's like, oh, that's a lot of different thoughts. Amazing. They aren't different. For most people, 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had yesterday. Meaning most people, what are they thinking about most of the time? Whatever they were thinking about yesterday. And if they're in a situation that they don't like, they're living a life of quiet desperation, their physical circumstances aren't where they want it to be, well, they're 95% of the time still thinking at that level that brought about those circumstances. So no wonder they never change. If you get what you think about most of the time and you're thinking the same thoughts over and over again from the inner world, meaning you're probably feeling the same things over and over again each day, you're just recreating your same experience. And it feels like it can never change. Because again, you think something in the physical is going to come and save you or change things for you. It won't. But if you take initiative and responsibility for your thoughts and your feelings, and again, that connection from the mental and spiritual, you will start creating new effects in your physical. And so if you understand, okay, 95% of the thoughts I had yesterday, I'm recreating today unless I wake up and change that. And then you start changing that. Again, you have a vision, you're focused more on the vision and have more faith in it than the current physical circumstances. You're changing your emotions and choosing differently. When you notice you're going to a negative place, things will start to change. Now, one caveat I want to give here is don't worry about you need to do this all the time. If you raise the importance and then get, beat yourself up because you're like, oh, I'm not doing well, I'm thinking negatively or whatever, again, what are you doing in that moment? Where are you emotionally when you're doing this? You're feeling guilty, which is one of the lowest emotions you can feel, by the way, one of the densest and one of the worst for your life, if you want to put it that way. And so it's not about doing that. It's about being gentle and just doing the best you can. If you fall off the horse, so you're thinking poorly, you're feeling bad, just work on getting back up on the horse. There might be a lag time between when you can get back up, but as long as you just keep doing your best to feel a little bit better, to think a little bit better, you will start noticing a difference. You will start noticing that it gets easier and easier and easier. The time you spend off the horse is less and less, and you're able to get back on faster and faster. Now, I have created videos on how you can absolutely help with this. One of the best things you can do if you notice I'm thinking negatively all the time and I'm feeling negatively all the time is to learn shadow work and letting go techniques, because you probably have a ton of blocks that are preventing you from thinking about what you want to think about, from feeling the way you want to feel. And so I'd go watch this video next where I go over shadow work and some of the best techniques to remove these blocks. And you'll be amazed that when you remove these, how much easier it is to think better and to feel better, which again, you get what you think about and feel about most of the time.